Claire had always loved old houses. They had a charm that modern homes lacked, a sense of history, as if their walls held secrets whispered across generations. So when she inherited her great-uncle's estate in the countryside, she couldn't wait to explore it. The house was a grand Victorian manor, surrounded by dense woods that almost seemed to swallow it whole. It had been empty for years, ever since her great-uncle mysteriously vanished without a trace. Most of the townspeople stayed away, claiming the house was cursed. But Claire, pragmatic and level-headed, dismissed such rumors as nothing more than local superstition. It was late afternoon when she arrived, the sun sinking low in the sky. The house loomed ahead, casting long, dark shadows across the overgrown driveway. She parked her car, grabbed her backpack, and walked up the stone steps to the front door. The key she'd been given fit perfectly into the lock, and with a twist, the door creaked open. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the scent of decaying wood. She wrinkled her nose but stepped forward, her footsteps echoing through the cavernous entry hall. The house was exactly as her great-uncle had left it, furniture draped in white sheets, cobwebs hanging from the corners like tattered curtains. But despite its abandoned state, the place felt alive, as if it had been waiting for her. The first few hours were uneventful. Claire wandered through the maze of rooms, marveling at the antique furniture and intricate woodwork. In the fading light, she discovered a grand library filled with dusty books and ornate leather chairs. She couldn't resist pulling one of the thick volumes from the shelves. As she flipped through its yellowed pages, she noticed strange notes scrawled in the margins, written in a shaky hand that she assumed was her great-uncle's. Most of the notes were unintelligible, half-formed sentences, strange symbols, and what looked like frenzied ramblings. One phrase, however, stood out, repeated over and over: "It's watching. Always watching." A shiver ran down her spine. She snapped the book shut, the sound echoing unnervingly in the silence. It was getting dark, and she decided it was time to find a bedroom to settle in for the night. After choosing a room on the second floor with a large four-poster bed, she set up her sleeping bag on top of the dusty mattress and changed into warmer clothes. The temperature in the house seemed to drop dramatically as the sun vanished behind the trees, plunging the world outside into darkness. Just as she was settling in, there was a noise. It was faint at first, like a soft tapping, barely audible over the whispering wind. At first, she thought it was just the house creaking in the cold, but then it grew louder, more deliberate. It was coming from the hallway outside her door. Claire's heart quickened. She told herself it was nothing, just old pipes or a loose shutter. But when she opened the door, the hallway was dark, the air heavy with a strange stillness. The tapping had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that made her skin crawl. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely more than a whisper. No response. She took a few hesitant steps down the hall, the floorboards creaking beneath her weight. Just as she reached the top of the staircase, she heard it again, a slow, deliberate tapping, this time from below. She leaned over the banister, her flashlight illuminating the foyer below, but there was nothing there. The house was still, as if it were holding its breath. Claire turned to go back to her room when she saw it, a shadow darting across the far end of the hallway. It moved too quickly to be human, a black blur that vanished into the darkness. She froze, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She tried to rationalize what she had seen, but every nerve in her body screamed that something was terribly wrong. Determined not to let her imagination get the best of her, she went back to her room and locked the door. She would explore in the morning, she told herself. But sleep did not come easily. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside her window set her on edge. Finally, exhaustion took over, and she drifted into a restless sleep. She awoke to the sound of a door slamming somewhere in the house. The clock on her phone read 3:15 a.m. The tapping had returned, louder now, echoing up from the floors below. Claire sat up, straining to hear. The sound was rhythmic, almost like footsteps, slow, deliberate, and coming closer. Terrified but unable to ignore it, she grabbed her flashlight and opened the door, stepping into the hallway. The air was colder than before, biting at her skin. As she made her way down the stairs, she noticed something strange. The house seemed different. The walls were covered in shadows that wreathed and twisted as if they had a life of their own. The tapping led her to the basement door, which stood ajar. Every instinct told her not to go down there, but something seemed to pull her forward, as if the house itself demanded her presence. She took a deep breath and descended the narrow staircase. The basement was pitch black, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something rotten. She swept her flashlight around, revealing a sprawling room filled with old furniture, broken crates, and thick cobwebs that clung to every surface. Then, she saw it. In the far corner of the room, hunched over a crumbling altar, was a figure. It was impossible to make out its features, but its shape was all wrong, its limbs too long, its back hunched at an unnatural angle. It moved with a jerky, almost mechanical motion, as if it were a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. Claire gasped, the sound betraying her presence. The figure stopped moving. Slowly, it turned to face her, its eyes glowing a sickly, unnatural yellow. For a moment, they locked eyes, and in that instant, she felt an overwhelming wave of dread wash over her, as if she was staring into the abyss itself. Then, without warning, the figure lunged. Claire screamed, dropping her flashlight, the beam spinning wildly as it hit the ground. She turned and sprinted up the stairs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. She could hear it behind her, its ragged breathing growing louder, closer. Bursting through the basement door, she slammed it shut behind her and bolted it. The house was alive with sound now, doors slamming, whispers filling the air, shadows dancing along the walls. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, fumbling with the keys as her hands shook violently. She drove away, tires screeching on the gravel driveway, the house disappearing into the darkness behind her. But as she looked into her rearview mirror, she saw it, those glowing yellow eyes watching her from the attic window, unblinking, as if it had marked her. Claire never returned to that house. But sometimes, in the dead of night, she could still hear the tapping sound echoing in her dreams, a reminder that whatever lurked in that old manor had not forgotten her.